Give me a glimmer of hope again. Save me from all my wandering. If I've been looking in all the wrong places, would you turn me back around again?
Welcome to HopeCasts, where our true stories brighten your day by providing insight and encouragement. I invite you to listen as my husband, Dr. Ken Brown, shares one of his amazing personal experiences that will inspire and stir your soul. Even in the challenges of life's darkest moments, you can always find a glimmer of hope through the love of God. So settle in, open your heart, and let's journey together through the power of storytelling.
Domestic 41. Police Academy provides substantial education and training for recruits seeking to become law enforcement officers. They taught us that more officers have been attacked in domestic investigations that seem to be simple and routine than any other part of police work. Of course, there is no such thing as a routine domestic. So, keep your guard up. Expect crazy. Know that alcohol is usually involved, so there can be no reasonability out of a bottle. Don't jump to conclusions. Never take sides or believe the first person that's reporting the crime without investigating first. Hear the whole thing. And sometimes just stopping them from killing each other for that very night is all that you can hope for. One person has to leave sometimes to keep the peace, which is the ultimate goal of a domestic investigation. After all, you're not a counselor. There's no magic cure. There's no magic wand to fix stupid abuse and broken relationships, etc., etc., etc. But no training in the entire world could have ever prepared me for that very first radio call for domestic intervention in my police career. When the police radio sputtered to life, 4109, 4109, please respond to a domestic altercation at XXX. When we arrived, the house was dark, and the light suddenly came on the porch, and then the inside light, and there was a woman. She was at the door, and she had this incredible handprint, a large handprint, and the thumb was at the bottom and the fingers were at the top into her forehead, and the finger marks on her face were so red, it looked like he'd been hit with a wicked hard slap. So, of course, I asked, who did this? And she said, my husband, he's in the kitchen. So I barreled in to confront this man monster who had abused a woman. And guess what? When I bellowed at him, who do you think you are that you're going to lay a hand on a woman? He turned around slowly. He was standing by the sink. And when he did, I saw the blood. His wife had taken a knife, a fillet knife with a 9-inch blade, and she had stuck it in his stomach, all the way up into the hilt. Now, it didn't actually go into his organs. It went along his muscles and his fat in between that layer. And he was holding his stomach and trying to stop it from bleeding. And he was holding his stomach over the sink, and the blood was going into the kitchen sink. I said, how did that happen? Totally surprised. And he said, well, my wife stabbed me because she didn't like what I was saying to her. I was telling her that this house needs to be cleaned. And with that, she picked up the fillet knife and stabbed me in the stomach. I looked at the woman with a shocked look in my face. And she said, well, he deserved it. He was being mean to me. Well, that night, I had eaten my words and remember what my training was. Actually, it was, in fact, the woman who had done the thing, and he had never hit her. When in fact he hit her, it was to push her away from him, and that's why his handprint was upside down. I sure learned a lesson that night about jumping to conclusions. And over the next years, I did 2,000 domestic investigations. And guess what? They did not get any easier with time. The longer you did it, the more you started to get jaded, the more you started to expect crazy. Domestic interventions actually create despair for the human condition because you see so much misery. You see so many people in such disrepair. You see people that are yelling at each other, and so much of it is to do with alcohol. So much of it is to do with affairs and coming home late and not spending the money the right way. Kind of after a while, you start to think, do relationships even work? Is there any good relationships anywhere? And you start to feel like, I don't want to have any part of this. Of course, my job was, as a counselor and a police officer, was to do these domestic interventions. And in 41 Division, they gave me so many of these domestic interventions because, of course, I had a degree in psychology and I was a minister. So they kept on saying, let the Rev do these. And they would send me, most of the time, cops would prefer not to go to a domestic intervention. They would prefer to do an arrest or to do some sort of anything instead of a domestic. But they kept on sending me there because I would give them information about community services and potential counseling, but very rarely did it actually work. One night, a few years later, I ended up being a training officer, and I was with a new rookie. And we got a call, 4110, attend this location. So we went there, and only this time, the house was in dark. We knocked at the door. We knocked harder at the door, but there was no answer. Nobody was answering whatsoever, and the lights were off. Finally, I kept on knocking so loudly that all of a sudden this door was open, and this woman came to the door, and she obviously had been crying. Her makeup had been running. I thought I saw an abrasion on the right side of her face. And she said, "We're okay. We're okay." I said, well, the dispatch, when they got this call at this location, said that there was a domestic violence and you were crying and you were screaming, as a matter of fact. She says, "No, we're okay." And all of a sudden, this woman was grabbed by a hand on her shoulder. She was bounced against the back wall in front of the door. And then as she bounced off the wall and came towards her, this man stepped in front of her and gave her a right elbow right to her chin. It just knocked her flying. And then this man, he started to yell. He started to bellow at me, "This is my house. Get off my land. Get out of my property." And he tried to slam the door on me. Well, I wasn't having any of this. I put my foot in the door and it slammed, and my foot, even with my police boots, was hurt because he had that much force. This man worked in a machine shop and he was built. His arms were like my legs. And so I came into the house and I said, "You just assaulted your wife in front of us, and I'm going to arrest you for assault. It's my duty to inform you that you have the right to retain and instruct counsel without delay. But you, sir, are under arrest for assaulting your wife." With that, he looked at me, and that's when he attacked me. He grabbed me, shook me like a leaf. He was so powerful. So I did a judo move. I took him, and I used his greater weight and strength against him, and I flipped him. And he went up in the air, and I moved, and then I flipped him around behind me. And in the dark, I didn't see, but there was a coffee table, a hand-carved coffee table from India. It looked like it was just so ornate, and it was just so beautiful. And he went up, and he fell right on that coffee table. And all of a sudden, that very expensive hand-carved coffee table became matchsticks. I jumped on his back and was trying to hold on to this monster. My partner, who was a brand new recruit, was scared. He had a look of terror on his face, and he was just standing there. I got my handcuffs off, and I managed to get one handcuff on him. And that's when I saw his wife. His wife had actually grabbed my police stick, because when I did the judo move, I was moving my hips so fast, my stick flew out of its holster. She picked it up, and now she was holding it in two hands over her head, ready to bash me on the head. She was saying, let go of my husband, even though she was dripping with blood from her nose. I was able to snatch the stick out of her hand just as she was swinging it. And that's when this man did a push-up with me on his back. I'm trying to keep him down, all 235 pounds of me, but he did a push-up and he got up onto his feet. And then, because I was on his back, he started to choke my partner. My partner didn't know what to do, and he was choking him. So I put a sleeper hold in this man, and all of a sudden, he collapsed, fell down. I was able to get the handcuffs on him finally. And that's when I looked up and saw that their 8-year-old son had just come into the room, and he was crying. He was saying, "Daddy, Daddy," because all he saw was this police officer arresting his father and then taking his father out of the house. I was so devastated. I was thinking, why did that woman change her mind? Why did she allow her son to come? Why did she pick up the stick? And then at court, why did she stop making a complaint and wanted to charge me with assault? It was just all backwards. And then, of course, I was upset at my partner because he didn't help. It was not a good situation. At court, he got arrested. He got charged with assault and actually did time for assaulting his wife and me. But the truth is, this man was insulted in his own home right in front of his child. And I felt sad because his son, no doubt, was seeing the abuse of his mother and seeing the abuse of this father, and yet still loved him. There's no winners. There's no winners with domestic situations. I was grieved in my heart, and I would say, God, why would you allow this? What's the problem? And of course, we know this is a fallen world. We know that people have problems. And the Bible says, in this world, you will have tribulation. But be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. And I would start to tell people about the hope that's in Christ, because I know that counseling is not going to fix them. Giving them a card with some human resources, the 211 number for community resources, isn't going to solve their problems, which generally involve relational problems. Well, there are some situations that you see and then you cannot unsee them. I can't unsee that 8-year-old boy's face. And I could not unsee this next call, the last call I'm going to talk about a domestic. Because sometimes you do your best. There is a saying that we are taught that there's the 90-90 rule with women that are assaulted. The 90-90 rule says this, that 90% of women that get assaulted, if they do not make a complete police complaint and charge the person, then there is a 90% certainty that they're going to be assaulted again. Not just by that man, but by other people in their lives. But it's the 90-90 rule, right? So if they charge the person and follow through, somehow it does something to the inside of that woman. And it does something to the person that's been the perpetrator. And there's a 90% chance that that woman will not only not be assaulted again by that man, but by anybody. Because they found their oats. They finally stood up on the inside. They finally got the help. And they finally realized that they don't deserve to be abused. The 90-90 rule is an important rule in domestic intervention. But what about the 10%? This woman answered the door, and she was screaming. She was screaming because she had been systematically tortured and abused and hit. And then this man came to the door, and he was screaming. He was even screaming louder. And he was telling me that I'm not allowed to come in his home, even though he'd hit this woman, and I know my rights. And of course, what happened is that we had to arrest him because he had actually repeatedly assaulted this woman, and the woman had to go to the hospital. So we took this man into the station for assault. We did the paperwork, which means that we We type up the arrest report and do the story and basically get him ready for trial. And it was midnight shift. And finally, we were tired. It was 7 in the morning and we were to go home. And as we're walking to our car, we saw a taxi cab. And who had already been released from jail? This man. They had gotten in the justice of the peace. They released him on his own signature. He just had to promise that he would not go back to the home, that he would not call the woman, not see the woman until he went to court, until he talked to the judge. And he signed this release, and he was released under his own signature, under his own cognizance. Well, I went home, fell into a deep sleep because I had been working for so long. An hour later, I was woken up by a phone call. The phone seemed so far away, but it kept on ringing. It kept on ringing. And would you believe it? It was the sergeant from day shift. She said, "Constable Brown, get your butt in here right now." I said, "Sarge, what's going on?" He says, "Get your butt in here. Report for duty." I said, "I've only had an hour's sleep." He said, "I'll give you half an hour. Get in here." But that's unusual. So I drove to the station, and I was brought up immediately to the detectives, and all of a sudden there was 2 detectives, and they were talking to me and interviewing me, and were putting me on the spot. It was only an hour later that I found out that that man had left the police station after being released, and he went home and murdered his wife. He's that 10%. There are some people that are just evil. And as a police officer, you bump into evil. You bump into things that you wish you had never seen. And that's why we need the Lord. Different people, different cops would say, "How can you be a cop and be a Christian?" I would tell them, "How can you be a cop and not be a Christian?" I need to know that there's sanity, that there is a God who sits in the circle of the world. There's a God who's still in control. There's a God that's going to come back and bring law and order. And so that is the hope I have, even in the middle of such madness and meaningless murder. I feel so sad for that woman who turned to police officers to help her. But because of the failure of the system and the release of a criminal, she ended up being a victim and paid with her life. This world is a fallen place. And sometimes police officers see the worst. They enter into evil. We need to have God to refresh us and to help us from becoming cynical and becoming so jaded and so filled with despair after all we see. Because Jesus is the answer. Jesus is the only hope. Maybe you have experienced trauma like this. You've experienced sorrow, and you don't know if there's any remedy. But God is able to do what you cannot do. Turn to Him, and He will help you in the middle of your crisis and despair. May God bless you and help you.
Thank you for tuning into HopeCasts for inspiring stories that will touch your heart. If today's story encouraged you, then please subscribe to our channel and visit us at hopecasts.org to learn more. You can also watch the video version of this story and many more from Dr. Brown on our HopeCasts, YouTube, or listen on our Spotify, Apple, or Amazon Music podcasts. Until next time, keep holding on to hope, and please share these stories with someone who really needs encouragement. May God bless you.
I've been searching and I've been seeking. It seems like you're nowhere to be found. And I'd do anything just to see you. If I close my eyes, will I see you now? 'Cause I know faith holds in what can't be seen, but my hope feels like a distant dream. Give me a glimmer of hope again. Save me from all my wandering. If I've been looking in all the wrong places, would you turn me